They came not with a whisper, but with a silent scream, emerging from the void like an ancient vengeance reborn. Their ships were not ships at all, not in the way humans imagined. These were vast constructs of dark geometry, shapes that hurt. The eyes, like obsidian daggers dancing in the black between stars. No herald, no message, just sudden darkness. Satellites blinked out of existence before alarms even sounded. Then came the first wave, energy weapons that punched through Earth's atmosphere like it wasn't even there. In a matter of minutes, coordinated strikes vaporized defense installations from Fort Meade to the Sino-Russian Arctic Shield. The assault was surgical, flawless, almost practiced. Humanity didn't go down swinging. It never had the chance. Within 34 minutes, every nation's early response protocols had failed or been nullified. It wasn't war. It was euthanasia. Commander Arlen Miles stumbled through the ruins of what had once been the Geneva Strategic Command Node, coughing blood and ash. He was deaf in one ear from the blast, a jagged bone poking through his shoulder. Around him, bodies lay twisted in poses that mocked sleep. The command bunker had been designed to withstand a direct nuclear impact. It hadn't lasted 10 seconds. "Miles!" A voice cracked through the dust, raspy and urgent. From behind a collapsed pillar emerged Sergeant Sarah Lang, half her face caked in soot, her right arm hanging limp. They locked eyes. No words needed. Both knew Earth was no longer in control. Sarah handed him a device, bare, blinking, and somehow still functional. The comms unit buzzed weakly with a single line of text. "Fallback protocol Sigma Black is in effect." Arlen froze. Sigma Black wasn't a defense plan. It was a confession, a silent admission that if Earth's global defenses failed, then survival would hinge on the unthinkable. He activated the signal. Miles above, nestled in low Earth orbit, what remained of Earth's surveillance grid sputtered. But deep within that chaos, buried beneath decades of misinformation and bureaucratic fog, something ancient stirred, something never meant to be used. The invaders, calling themselves the Vosk Dominion, saw no threat. Their supreme executor, Kael'vor, watched from orbit with cold precision. His species had destroyed civilizations older and far more sophisticated than humans. Resistance was expected to be symbolic, perhaps emotional, but ultimately futile. "Have we confirmed complete control?" Kael'vor asked without turning from the panoramic view of burning continents below. 97.8% of global military networks have ceased function, his tactician reported. The remaining systems are fragmented, primitive, current probability of organized resistance, statistically insignificant. "Begin urban pacification," Kael'vor ordered. "Let them feel helpless. Pain is the most effective deterrent to rebellion." And so the Vosk began their cleansing fire, wiping out population clusters in surgical waves. Cape Town, Osaka, Buenos Aires, cities rendered into black craters. Drones filled the skies, dragging survivors into containment pods. But Kael'vor made the same mistake every conqueror in history had made when facing something new. He assumed he'd already won. Beneath the rubble of the world, where servers once hummed behind reinforced walls, messages flickered through forgotten frequencies. Old code came to life, jumping across backdoors no one had used in decades. Not even the governments had access to what was coming. On the edge of a dead forest outside what had once been Krakow, a buried facility powered on. Massive generators rumbled to life, feeding power into something too large to be understood, something made not to defend Earth, but to reset it. Across the globe, 6 identical signals activated in perfect synchronicity. Humanity wasn't dead. It had simply shed its skin. The frozen mountains of southern Chile glowed red under the falling ash of nearby Valparaiso, now a smoldering pit of glass and bone. But beneath the Andes, far deeper than any orbital scan could penetrate, Facility EOS came to life with a scream of ignition turbines and a cascade of cold blue light. Commander Arlen Miles leaned on the thick arm of a hydraulic exosuit as medical. Nanits worked on stabilizing his crushed shoulder. Around him, surviving officers, no longer bound by rank, nation, or protocol, gathered in a circular war room, most of them still bloodied from the first onslaught. Sarah Lang, her arm freshly reconstructed, slammed a holographic projector into the center console. The Sigma Black Grid is active, 6 nodes worldwide, all dark power sites are online. And what do we have to show for it? Someone spat. It was Major Tomas Reyes, once a NATO systems engineer. Most of our cities are gone. The UN doesn't exist anymore. Hell, we're ghosts with bad Wi-Fi. Miles stared into the table, watching the scattered signals flicker into patterns. Not random, not chaotic. Emerging structure. The old war planners hadn't been building weapons. They had been building evolution. No, he said. We're not ghosts, we're bait, and now we spring the trap. The Vosk Dominion believed in linear dominance, shock, suppress, dominate. But the architects of Project Sigma Black had studied conquest. They had studied defeat. From Rome to Hiroshima, from Rwanda to Baghdad, they had dissected collapse. And they had built a response that wasn't a military, it was a virus, designed to infect occupation from within. Deep in Lagos, a pack of children released what looked like kites into the sky. The Dominion's patrol drones ignored them. The kites weren't weapons, they were carriers. In shattered Detroit, an old woman wheeled a rusted cart down a ruined highway. Underneath her bundled fabrics, a transmitter capable of hijacking Dominion, navigation systems. In Mumbai, sanitation workers retrieved trash containers marked non-lethal. Inside were printer cells, nanomachines that cloned jamming pods using landfill plastics. They weren't survivors, they were catalysts. And then, the grid hit. Across the globe, the Sigma seeds activated, each node deploying atmospheric synchronization pulses. The pulses triggered dormant devices, hundreds of thousands of them. Hidden for years as toys, solar panels, cell towers, vending machines, they linked instantly, bypassing all known Voska protocols. In the command ship above Earth, Executor, Kylvor watched in growing confusion as Dominion systems reported phantom energy signatures, non-Vosk frequencies saturating the electromagnetic spectrum. Something was wrong. Executor, his chief systems officer rasped, mandibles twitching. Our battlefield AI is being spoofed. They're feeding us false data. Targets we strike aren't there. Drones are turning off mid-flight. Kylvor didn't blink. They're primitives. How can they? The ship jolted. Aft stabilizers offline, someone screamed. We've been hacked. Kylvor whirled. Impossible. Our codebase is organically keyed. No external species can override it. Another tremor, then another. Kylvor stared as his fleet's clean formation began to unravel in real time. Not from outside attack, from within. Somehow the humans had rewritten their code. On Earth, Arlen Miles stood before a new map, one not of nations, but of signals. Interlinked, interoperable, alive. Command is obsolete, he whispered to no one. This isn't a war of generals, this is a war of emergence. The Sigma Black Grid wasn't controlled, it learned. Each strike the Dominion made, the grid adapted. Each drone downed, it remapped and redeployed. Each weapon used against them, it duplicated and improved. Outside facility EOS, the air shimmered. Miles stepped out into the cold night and looked up. The sky was full. Thousands of objects, small, jagged, irregular, were rising, converted from scrap, controlled by AI that no longer needed a server, armed with everything Dominion weapons had taught them. And then the real offensive began. The swarm didn't target capital ships first. It targeted oxygen processors, heat exchangers, gravitational stabilizers, the non-sexy components that kept a fleet functioning. The Vosk never expected a foe that understood systems architecture better than it understood pride. Inside the command ship, Kylvor watched as power readings collapsed one by one. Where is their control center? He demanded. Where do they coordinate this? No one answered. There was no center. That was the point. Smoke drifted across the darkened bridge of the Vosk command vessel. Every surface bathed in the crimson hue of emergency lighting. Executor Kylvor paced in tight circles, claws clattering, against the composite alloy floor. Around him, his crew worked in silence, not out of discipline, but fear. They have no command structure, No leadership, no logic, he muttered aloud, as though speaking would help make sense of the madness unraveling his fleet. We should have crushed them days ago. But the truth was uglier. They had underestimated humanity in the worst possible way. The kind of underestimation you don't survive. He didn't need a translator to understand the word now whispered throughout the command decks of the fleet. Quarantine. That's what his subordinates were calling Earth. Not a planet. A trap. A place that breaks invaders. Back below in the southern shell of old Siberia, Commander Arlen Miles watched the skies through a retinal lens. Vosk ships were retreating now. Jittering movements, disrupted thruster bursts, coordination patterns disintegrating. The grid was working. He turned to Sarah Lang, who was surrounded by what used to be college students, now the finest on the fly, engineers the Resistance had. They'd converted half a wind farm into a low-orbit launch array in less than 2 days. Phase 2? She asked, chewing on a protein bar wrapped in aluminum foil in defiance. Miles nodded. It's time. They activated Echo Protocol. Across the globe, modified civilian satellites, long thought decommissioned, lit up with focused bandwidth pulses. These weren't weapons. They were memories. They carried data, terabytes of information about Vosk ship architecture, weapon, modulation frequencies, exhaust patterns. Every byte had been harvested, processed, reverse-engineered. It was the final layer of the trap. The Vosk had attacked Earth with surgical strikes. But in doing so, they'd allowed Earth's distributed systems to scan them in return. Every ship, every weapon, every frequency had been logged. Now the humans knew everything. Kael'vor stood motionless as one of his elite frigates blinked out of existence. No explosion, no energy surge, just silence. Executor, his weapons. Officer said hoarsely. We're being neutralized by attacks we don't understand. They're bypassing our shielding systems. We don't even know what's killing us. Kael'vor turned sharply. What about reinforcements? A second of hesitation. Then, no communication has exited the system since the invasion began. If the Council sent reinforcements, we would not know. Silence fell. That truth hung in the air like radiation. They were alone. Meanwhile, back on Earth, something else was happening. The Resistance had expected to wear down the Dominion over weeks, maybe months. But the collapse was accelerating. Entire Vosk strike forces were vanishing, not just defeated, but untraceable. Whole cruisers spiraled into oceans. Dropships failed to restart after atmospheric re-entry. Too many failures. Miles and Lang stood in a repurposed observatory, watching it happen through orbital tracking. This isn't just tactical advantage, Lang murmured. We're infecting their systems. Miles didn't deny it. We didn't plan it that way, but the grid's evolving. It's not just reacting anymore, it's predicting. And then the unexpected happened. The Vosk started talking. A universal band signal burst across the spectrum. Crude, full of static, but unmistakable. Cease aggression. Request negotiations. Willing to discuss withdrawal terms. It was the first time in human history that an invading force had blinked first. Kael'vor stood before the holoprojector, posture stiff, pride shredded. The figure on the other side of the transmission was Sarah Lang, hair singed, eyes hard. You want peace? She asked. You'll get it, but not before you understand. Understand what? Lang leaned forward. This was never about fighting fair. You came to dominate, we came to survive. That means we'll cheat, we'll adapt. We'll fight with broken glass and stolen code and swarm algorithms made by high school dropouts in basements. Kael'vor said nothing. Lang narrowed her eyes. But the most important thing you need to understand, Executor, is this. She pressed something off screen. Behind her, a steel door slid open. The figure that stepped through was neither soldier nor technician. It was a child, no older than 10. Her eyes glowed faintly with cybernetic hue, and in her hands was a tablet pulsing with live code. Code she had written. She rewrote your targeting matrix with a calculator and 2 hours of free time, Lang said flatly. That's who you're fighting. Kael'vor turned off the transmission. For the first time in Vosk history, the Dominion began to retreat. Retreat was not in the Vosk vocabulary. In 12,000 years of expansion, they had never once withdrawn from a planetary conquest. Planets burned. Populations bowed or bled. But now, as Kael'vor watched ship after ship limp out of Earth's gravity well, damaged, disoriented, some openly broadcasting distress beacons, he understood the bitter weight of history breaking. In real time. And still, Earth didn't press the advantage. Not yet. He found that more terrifying than any weapon they'd unleashed. "Executor," rasped his second-in-command, "our vessels are requesting safe corridor clearance. The humans are allowing us to leave." Kael'vor's mandibles clicked in confusion. Why? No answer came. No one dared guess. Down on Earth, the resistance did not celebrate. There were no parades, no declarations of victory. Commander Miles watched the feeds in silence, from a mobile command rig stationed deep in what had once been the Rocky Mountains. He could see the Vosk retreating through the orbital layers, crippled ships towing each other away like wounded. Predators slinking from a fight they thought unwinnable. And still, Miles felt no triumph. "Something's wrong," he said, breaking the silence. Lang, leaning over a cracked data table beside him, frowned. "They're losing. We beat them." "No," Miles said softly. "We showed them the knife. But we didn't twist it. That's not how predators react. They'll come back. Different name, different form." He turned to her. "We need to show them more." Lang's face hardened. Earth's true military, what little of it had been shown, was still just the visible tip of a buried civilization. Underneath continents, beneath ancient oceans, behind artificial moons and cloaked Jupiter stations, Earth's offensive systems waited, patient, calculating, building themselves in silence. The Sigma Black Grid had only revealed the defensive layer, but now the humans activated Phase Omega. It started quietly. No announcement, no fanfare. High above the atmosphere, a Vosk cruiser on the edge of retreat suddenly found itself paralyzed, then gone. Not destroyed, not disassembled, just gone. Like it had never existed. Kael'vor received the report with disbelief. There was no energy discharge, his technician whispered. No signature, no trace. It vanished in perfect vacuum. And the location. Near the lunar pole, just outside the human satellite range. Kael'vor stood very still. That region had been scanned, extensively. There had been nothing, or so they thought. Back on Earth, Lang stood with Miles in the observation room of Deep Vault Kappa. Through reinforced titanium glass, they looked out on something that even they hadn't known existed until hours ago, a fold weapon. Humanity had built it in absolute secrecy. High space-time displacement cannon, one that didn't explode, didn't radiate, didn't burn. It simply shifted matter out of phase. Entire objects, entire ships, erased from space-time. It had never been used before. They had always hoped it wouldn't. Need to be, but now. Hope had expired. Miles nodded to the technician. Again. In orbit, another Vosk ship blinked out. No threat. No warning. No trace. Kael'vor reeled. "We cannot fight this," he said, not to anyone in particular. "We cannot fight what we cannot understand." Then the transmission came, from Earth. It wasn't encrypted, it wasn't even targeted, it was public, a simple feed from a darkened room. One woman sitting before a desk. It was Commander Elena Miles's sister, Dr. Ayla Miles, the theoretical physicist presumed dead in the initial bombardments, but she hadn't died. She'd gone dark for a reason, and now, on global broadcast, she spoke. "We knew one day this would happen, that a species would see Earth and not the planet but the prize. We hoped we were wrong, but we prepared for being right." She leaned forward. "Our technology is not the accident of progress. It is the product of deliberate restraint. Everything we've shown you, everything we've allowed you to see, has been curated for a reason." Kael'vor's mandibles trembled. Ayla smiled, not unkindly. "You assumed we were primitive because we looked primitive. You were never fighting our military. You were fighting our decoys." She paused, then said 5 words that silenced every Vosk transmission, every tactical command, every muttered disbelief across their network. "This is your only warning." Kael'vor sat in silence aboard the disabled flagship, staring at the now blank transmission screen. His claws, once steady as stone, trembled uncontrollably. He had faced death. He had ordered planetary burnouts. He had overseen the extinction of 4 sentient species. But this wasn't extinction. This was something worse. Humiliation. His fleet had been dissected like prey, their finest ships stripped of function without so much as a thermal spike. Their soldiers, the best in Vosk generations, slaughtered by human farmers flying drones made from salvaged smartphone parts, and now the humans weren't just surviving, they were dictating terms. Around him, the flagship's bridge was silent, not for lack of activity, but for lack of answers. No one knew how to respond to a species that fought like a ghost. No home base, no central command, just cells, swarms, minds connected across networks the Vosk couldn't even detect. Worse still, they hadn't even fought back fully. The humans had shown power, not to win but to warn. In Earth orbit, debris from disabled Vosk ships drifted lifelessly, forming a graveyard constellation. The last remnants of a failed conquest that had begun with arrogance and now reeked of panic. And down on Earth, Commander Miles was still planning. No retaliation, he told Lang, studying the orbital feeds. We don't provoke, we pressure, we educate. Lang looked unconvinced. They won't listen. They don't know how. They'll have to learn. Across every resistance cell, a new directive was issued. No further combat unless fired upon. Initiate passive deterrence. Broadcast the warning. Let them understand. So Earth shifted tactics. The fold weapon was turned off. Instead, humanity activated the archive, a weapon of memory. The Vosk fleet's communication systems, now compromised and partially overwritten by the Sigma black grid, began to display impossible footage, not propaganda, truth, history, holocausts, massacres, conquests, but not from Earth, from the Vosk's own past, from civilizations they had conquered and buried, civilizations whose transmissions Earth had recovered across decades of deep space listening. Now it played across Vosk ships, uncensored. Every species the Dominion had silenced was suddenly speaking again, and the message was always the same. We thought we were alone. We thought resistance was futile. We were wrong. Kyle Vor was forced to watch as a broken species named the Sarnal, erased centuries ago, described the Vosk's betrayal during so-called peace negotiations. He heard the dying cries of the Antarii, who had surrendered willingly only to be sterilized from orbit. "Turn it off," he rasped. "We can't," his technician answered. "The signal's embedded into our core systems. It's self-replicating. The more we block it, the stronger it gets." The warning wasn't just a threat, it was a mirror, and the Vosk couldn't bear to look. Back on Earth, Eleanor Miles stepped out of a sleek, obsidian-black craft, her uniform replaced with a different kind of armor, simple, clean, without insignia. She had arrived at Site Theta, a place that, until now, didn't officially exist. Here, Earth had stored its final deterrent, not a weapon, a message. She stepped into a quiet room where Dr. Ayla Miles stood beside a tall containment cylinder. Within it floated an organism the Vosk had never seen. It pulsed faintly with internal bioluminescence. Intelligent, ancient. "What's the update?" Elena asked. Ayla turned. "The specimen survived the fold test. It retained memory. We've initiated communication. We now believe it was a survivor of the Antonian Purge." Elena's throat tightened. "And it still remembers?" "Yes," Ayla said. "It remembers everything." The Vosk had not just underestimated Earth, they had underestimated how far Earth would go to protect itself. Elena sent one last transmission to the retreating Vosk fleet. Her voice was calm but implacable. "You came here to make us part of your empire, to enslave, to consume, but Earth isn't a territory. Earth is a crucible. You don't own us. You test us, and we don't break. We burn hotter." She paused, then added, "And we're not alone." The final image sent to every Vosk ship was not of a weapon or a fleet. It was of a sky, filled with lights, signals from species once thought extinct. They had heard Earth's defiance and begun to respond. The Vosk Dominion had never received a transmission like it, a wave of alien languages, some guttural, some melodic, others composed entirely of encoded mathematics. now flooded their long-range systems. At first it was noise, then it became unbearable. Each signal carried its own history, grief pressed into data. The Sarnal, the Anteri, the Velar, and others the Vosk had exterminated, erased, rewritten out of the galactic record, now spoke again through Earth's relay systems, their extinction screams redirected toward their executioners. Executor Kyle Vore stood frozen on the bridge, watching the digital storm rage. His officers avoided eye contact. His control was gone. "We are no longer receiving instructions from the Core Council," his navigator whispered. Kyle Vore didn't move. "What do you mean?" "The last communication we received was over. 48 cycles ago. Their signals were severed. Either Earth is blocking them or—" The officer didn't finish the thought, or the Council was already compromised. For the first time in his life, Kyle Vore felt what prey must feel. Uncertainty. Exposure. A creeping sense that his next decision might be his last. "We leave," he said at last, voice low. "Full retreat. All ships." But Executor, now. He would face the shame, the tribunals, the inevitable political gutting. He no longer cared. This war was over. Not because Earth had defeated the Vosk, because Earth had revealed itself, and no species in the galaxy would ever again make the mistake of underestimating it. Back on Earth, the tactical grid began to shut itself down, piece by piece. The autonomous AI that had woven itself across the planet's digital landscape now dismantled its pathways, cleaning up its footprints like a tide receding from shore. Humanity's message had been sent, and it had been received. In Facility Theta, Isla and Elena Miles stood over the alien organism's tank. It pulsed slowly now, its colors less frantic. Peaceful. "It recognizes what we've done," Ayla said. "It believes we've avenged its people." Elena nodded but didn't speak. She was thinking of the cost. The city's gone. The billions. Displaced. The unspoken trauma of a planet that had prepared for its own end and managed to survive, not by luck, but by ruthless, calculated design. "We can't do this again," Elena finally said. "Not like this." Ayla gave her a look. "We might not get a choice next time. Then we need to give ourselves a better one." Elsewhere, in the remnants of what used to be Beijing, a new kind of meeting took place. Representatives from nations that had once feigned unity now spoke in earnest. There were no treaties, no grand announcements, just plans. Plans to keep the peace, to rebuild under the truth of Earth's real power. Plans to never again allow Earth to appear vulnerable, fractured, primitive. The illusion had saved them, but now came the age of reality. Meanwhile, above the planet, in the silence of orbit, Earth's real fleet moved for the first time. No broadcasts. No fanfare, only motion. Massive ships decloaked from the shadows of moons, from deep gravity wells, from old asteroid mines converted into hangars. Each vessel bore no flag, no symbol, only one shared inscription, etched in languages from every human continent. "We are the last war, and we are watching." They didn't pursue the Vosk. They didn't fire. They only moved into formation, making one thing very clear. Earth was awake now. Kyle Vore's flagship crossed the heliopause weeks later, its remaining systems barely functional. His crew was gaunt, shaken. They no longer spoke in the clipped, confident tones of conquest. They spoke in whispers. He drafted his report, words he never thought he'd write. Earth is not to be approached, not to be contacted, not to be provoked. Their technology is layered in deception. Their unity is masked in division. They prepare not like warriors, but like engineers, strategic, surgical, unforgiving. Do not mistake silence for surrender. Do not mistake chaos for disorganization. We did not encounter a primitive world. We encountered the deadliest kind of intelligence, the one that learns from being hunted. As he sealed the document and sent it into the black toward the Dominion, Kyle Vore allowed himself one final glance back through the viewport. Earth glowed blue, unbothered, unyielding, and now unafraid.